Okay, so welcome everybody. We're in Siman Shin Yud Chet, and we actually left off with what was the last thing we studied? Does anyone remember the last topic we were talking about? Wasn't it Bishul Achar Bishul?
Bishul Achar Bishul and Irui.
Irui. Yeah, actually, there's a little bit more about Irui this time. So today we're going to talk about not Bishul Achar Bishul, but Bishul Achar Afia, cooking after baking. This is like relevant for, I don't know, putting bread in soup, or that's why they have like the croutons, and not croutons. In Israel, they have like boiled, like little pasta boiled in oil that you then put in your soup. So it's already been boiled, and not croutons. And that's part of the reason is that there's no, it's not bishul achar fia, it's bishul achar bishul. So what is the source for this idea of what is the source for this that bishul?
Wait, Rab Nachum, before we get to
after a fia is forbidden. Yeah, Joel.
No. Before we get to the source, I was actually thinking that also would be a case of if you put pasta on your plata, right?
That might be achar bishul.
Yeah. So
you put it. Yeah, if dry cooking is considered like a fia.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it could be. What is another case? Well, the other case we mentioned before, one of my favorite ideas is the black coffee. This is bishul achar afia. All right, so let's start with the tour in Hay. Let's start in a tour in Hay. Maybe Ori, you want to read? But you're on mute. No, you can.
I mean, my sound was just messed up. Is it
okay? Now I hear you.
The Katav Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz.
So Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz, who is that? What book did he write?
Is it the same as the Yeraim?
It's the Yeraim, exactly. It's the Yeraim. This is his book. So we're going to refer to him either as Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz or Mimitz. I think Mitz. I think Mitz is Metz, which is a city in Germany. That's what I think. But I think sometimes I think it's Metz, really.
Isn't he? He's one of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, isn't he? I think he is.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So he's from Germany. So there you go. I think it's Metz. Anyway, he's the Yeraim. So Kasav. So go ahead. Katav Harav.
Aval Gav she'en bishul achar bishul b'davar yavesh. Even though there's no bishul achar bishul for something dry, b'davar she'na afeh o nitzleh yesh bo mishum bishul. But it is possible for there to be bishul after something is baked or even roasted. Nitzleh. Im bishlo achar kach b'mashkim. If the second bishul was in some kind of liquid. And I guess pasta would be sort of a paradigm of that, where it's really cooked once and then
boiled. No, pasta. Well, I don't know if it's dried. I don't know if it's baked before you boil it. Whatever. You're not gonna. Obviously, you can't make pasta.
Well, maybe it was.
Anyway, no. The paradigm is about to give an example. The asur is going to give an example. Here's the example.
And you can't put bread even in a klisheni that's hot to the hand. The tema, and there.
Now wait a second. What did anybody look at the source sheet that I gave on the Yeraim? And I underlined a line. What was the line that I underlined?
Even in a klishlishi shayat in the Yeraim.
Exactly. So exactly. But you see that the tour and the Beit Yosef didn't have that version. But just interesting that he's also forbidding a klishlishi as cooking.
Right. I mean, it might be worth reading the next bit. I know the Beit Yosef's going to mention it. She'ein anu bikim b'dvarim rakim v'kashim becomes an important part of it, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. He also says she'ein anu bikim b'dvarim rakim v'kashim Mihu
Mihu
mitbashel
mitbashel
b'kli
b'kli
sheni,
sheni.
umihu she'eno mitbashel. We don't know what could cook in kli sheni and what couldn't cook in kli sheni.
Or kli shlishi.
Right, that's already like a hint to this idea, which we're going to see of Kale Bishul, or which we saw of Kale Bishul. Okay, so
I
go
thought
ahead.
it was also important because the idea that we're not bikian is why he's being so machmir to kli sheni or maybe even kli shlishi. There's some ambiguity when it comes to this.
Yeah, well,
Bishul.
that's what the Bet Yosef is going to say, actually. Yeah, so let's continue.
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in. Okay, the tema. Lama asur b'kli sheni. Why would they go so far to forbid kli sheni ve'efshar?
You know, kli sheni doesn't cook.
Right, that's been our understanding. Dimidami le lemelach, because that's similar to salt. And we have a proof in the Gemara. The Kamar Gemara, lechad lishna shemavashel afilu b'kli sheni.
So basically what happens is the tour is looking for some place in Shas where we see that there is Bishul in Kli Sheni, and the only place that comes up or comes to mind is this salt case. Now, why in earth would it be similar to salt? That's exactly his tema. But he's saying maybe the Yereim thinks that somehow it's like salt. Okay. Because there we do see that there's Bishul in Kli Sheni. Go ahead.
So that was
He
part
says,
of the question.
but obviously it's not salt, so it should be mutter. So he doesn't agree. In other words, he tries to explain it, but he says this is why I don't understand it because it's not salt. Okay, go on.
The katavar of Peretz sheba'afia achar afia utzliya achar tzliya yesh omrim shegam asur divrei Rabbi Eliezer Mitz. Vehu katav shafilu dvarav ein afia achar afia velo tzliya achar tzliya. So Rav Peretz explained that afia after afia or tzliya after tzliya. There are those who say that that's also asur according to the Araim.
All right, what would be the logic?
That another cooking is possible in the cases of afia and tzliya.
Yeah, but even if it was a fia in first, why would tzliya achar tzliya be forbidden? He just said that he said bishul achar afia.
So
So
that was on our example.
why would these be included? I think the answer is, or Joel, tell me if this is what you're thinking. I think it's because basically the Gemara just says ein bishul achar bishul. So anything that's not bishul achar bishul is going to be forbidden. In other words, ein bishul achar bishul, but tzliya achar tzliya is not bishul achar bishul, so therefore it's forbidden. As the only heter we have is bishul achar bishul, and so that's he said understanding that's how the Yereim is saying. In other words, why did the Yereim say that there's bishul achar afia? Because it's not a bishul achar bishul. So if that's the case, then everything that's not bishul achar bishul should be forbidden. I think that's the way those people want to learn it, but Rabbeinu Peretz does not agree with them. And what does he say?
That even
Vahu katav. What does it mean? Vahu katav. That's in other words. That's Rabbeinu Peretz.
Right, Peretz.
Shafilu devarav, like even to the words of
the Yereim.
Of the Yereim, ein afia achar afia v'lo tzliya achar tzliya. Fine. In other words, no, he never said that. Don't put words in his mouth. Okay. So that's
it's limited. Basically, it's limited to bishul achar afia, this sort of weird in between case.
Yeah, exactly. It's just bishul achar afia. And do we have a psak here?
He's bringing the Yereim lahalacha. I thought in terms of limiting it to bishul achar afia.
All right, so let's jump ahead.
He had a question that he didn't really answer about if it's similar to melach.
Well, he was tama. The tour said this is what the Yereim says, but he says, but it don't go so far as kli sheni. Maybe, and therefore it's only in a kli rishon that you would have bish. You couldn't. So therefore, on your plate, if you had soup on your plate, which is certainly a kli sheni, maybe even a kli shlishi, there would not be a problem. But because he rejected the extra, he sort of accepted the idea that there's bishul acharfia, but not in a kli sheni. So let's look quickly in a kind of a foreshadowing. Let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says, and then we'll come back. So Shulchan Aruch, it's sometimes good to just, after you read the Torah, to see, okay, well, where is the Shulchan Aruch going? So here, or we keep reading.
Okay, yesh mi shomer dedavar shena'afeh o nitzleh, im bishlo achar kach b'mashkeh, yesh bo mishum bishul. So there are those who say that something that is baked or roasted, if it was then cooked afterwards in a liquid, that would be considered bishul. But asur litain pat, and therefore you can't put bread. Afilu b'kli sheni sheyad. So that even in a kli sheni that's hot to the hand. V'yesh matirin, and there are also those who are matir.
So
he leaves it a little bit open. It sounds like his psak is don't put bread in even in kli sheni, but he brings those shitot that would allow
right.
it.
And now read the Ramah. So he basically, wait a second. So let's conclude. He is agreeing with the Urim kind of against the Tur, right?
Well, it sounds like he would know because I'm assuming he's a Kli Rishon, which would still be.
No, he says Bekli Sheni, which is not what the Tur said. The Tur didn't agree with the Urim, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least he was Tama alav. I don't know if he agreed with him, but he was Tama alav. And maybe I'm misreading that.
No, you're right. He says ve'eno nira le'osro b'kli sheni. The Torah says. Right.
So here he's so he could be the Yesh Omrim, Yesh Matirin. Well, Yesh Matirin, right. Yeah, could be him. Okay.
And the Ramah.
It's really going to be the Smak. Anyway, yeah, read the Ramah, and then the Ramah here is a continuation. Yesh Matirin b'kli sheni. Yesh Matirin b'kli sheni, but he's saying, but nobody's matir in Kli Rishon.
Mm-hmm. No, then he says
Yesh Makilin afilu b'Kli Rishon. But there are people that allow in Kli Rishon. So actually, the Ramah is opening up even more of a leniency than the Mechaber. She says, but we're going to still be the minhag, and obviously you have to follow the minhag, is even in Kli Sheni. So he's saying that really there's some that are even in a Kli Rishon would allow it. And then he's saying, but we're actually following that even in Kli Sheni you're not allowed. But this is a big machloket about how to, when the Ramah said, when the Mechaber says Yesh Matirin what? There are some modern poskim who say when he says Yesh Matirin, they don't go like the Ramah. And they say Yesh Matirin b'Kli Rishon. But the Ramah says no. When he's explaining the Beit Yosef, and he's saying no, Yesh Matirim, he means Yesh Matirim b'Kli Sheni, and that's the smak. All right, so let's look at all these different opinions, and maybe we'll see if there's any rationale to it. So let's go back to the Beit Yosef. We're not going to read it all, but I have some sections that are good to read. The beginning, for example. Here, Max, you want to read the beginning of the Beit Yosef?
Okay. V'kasav Rav Rabbeinu Eliezer mimitz af agav she'in bishul achar bishul ze lashon smag. Pasak harav Rabbeinu Eliezer mimitz af al pi she'in bishul achar bishul ki ditznan beperach chavis kol sheba bechamin v'chulei perush bechamin bekli rishon shenisbashel kol tzorko. Mikom makom yesh bishul achar afia v'tzli. Afui v'tzali. De kaimalan kirabi yosi. De amar yotzin befesach b'matzos rakik sharui aval lo bimvushal achar afia.
Wait, let me stop you. First of all, what was this? What was the proof that he brought? What was the proof that he brought that there's no bishul achar bishul? We've probably seen that before. Just remind us.
Because if something was cooked or soaked,
Well, first of all, we're seeing that the kol Shabbat b'chamin means it was fully cooked.
Cooked, right? Before Shabbos, in a Kli Rishon, that you wouldn't then be able to cook it further afterwards.
Right. In other words, it's not called cooking if you any further cooking.
Right.
So therefore, you could put it in hot water or something. Okay. And then he brings a proof here about Pesach. So we stopped you in the middle there. That what does his prove? Now we're going to prove that there is a fia. This is all the smag. And he's going to prove that there is bishul. There is bishul achar afia from matzah. So what's the proof? So read v'yotzin b'pesach b'matzot rekik.
Okay. Yotzin b'pesach b'matzot rekik sharui avalo bimvushal achar afia. Afal gav shelo nimuach shabishul achar king.
That's the end of the quote.
Okay, so so this is matzah that's been. These are like wafers, right? That have been soaked.
Exactly. You can take matzah on Pesach, and if it's difficult, if you eat dry matzah, you can soak it in water, and then you can eat that in your yotze. But what can't you do?
But you can't cook it.
Exactly. After
it's already
even if it's not a matzah ball,
right?
It's not mushed up. It's it didn't get mushed up in the cooking process, but you still can't have it. Why? And I was going to explain.
Because the bishul after the fact nullifies the fact that it was ever baked.
Right. Now there was bishul after baking accomplishes something. It's a new act. It's a bishul, and therefore there's bishul achar afia. So we continue on. Hilchach Yizayir Adam.
Hilchach Yizayir Adam shelo yitain pat afuya afilu b'chlei sheni b'Shabbos b'makom sheyatzoleres bo gam mitzli Yizayir Adam uvasar odag mevushal lo yitain etzel ha'esh bechom gadol sheyatzoleres bo. Okay, so person should be careful not to put baked bread even into a Kli Sheni on Shabbos. If it's still boiling hot, and the same goes for something that's been roasted.
So wait a second. This is the smag quoting the Yiraim. Just to be clarify where we are. This is still the smag quoting the Yiraim. And he's saying what?
As in a Kli Sheni, if it's he says here, Yatzoleres bo, which was not in. It was.
Yeah, well, it's not right. He's not really quoting the Yiraim, but he claims to be quoting the Yiraim. He's not. It's not the same as the Yiraim that I brought, but he's saying started off by saying Pesach Yiraim, and then he brought all this discussion. I don't know if right. I mean, he's saying it. He's not necessarily. He's saying it in the name of the Yiraim. Whether it's exactly in the words that we have, I don't think so. But anyway, let's go on. Let's go on. So wait a second. So where are we? He said Kli Sheni b'Shabbat b'makom sheyad soledet bo v'gam, and then he says gam mitzli zaher adam. Also by roasting, you should be careful. Ubas adam ubas. I think there's a correction here. No. Ubasar odag mevushal lo yiten etzel ha'esh. So in other words, that would be tzliya achar bishul, right? He's saying also there's tzliya achar bishul because you can't take basar odag mevushal lo yiten etzel ha'esh bechom gadol sheyad zoledet bo. Can't put it in the fire. V'im asa, and if you did take your your boiled meat and roast it in a fire, chilel to Shabbat. Lo skila v'chatat. Even though you should get skila v'chatat, maybe skila by mazid and hatat by shogeg. If you ad kan l'shona, that's the end of the lashon of the Reim. That's why I said that was all the Reim. Now he's going to go. Now is the smog talking. So continue here. Makli.
Okay. Umikli sheni shekasav harav domeh shetofes ikar deyesh dvarim shemitbashlim af bikli sheni ki damrinan demelach bikli sheni nami bishla ve'ein anu bikiin bidvarim hakalin liisbashel ve're'ui lachmir bechulan ad kan lashon smag.
Right. So he's saying you should be careful. Where is this cliche? So there's the tour when he said that cliche is by salt. Well, he got it from the smog because the smog said that cliche is obviously learned from salt. And then he says, "Ve'ein anu," and why can we expand from just salt? All we have is salt. Why other things? Well, salt is easily to cook. Ve'ein anu b'ki'im b'devarim hakalim litbashel. And there you have kali bishul. So I think this is the earliest source for kali bishul in the smog. That we don't know what is things that are easy to cook, and salt is just one example of things that are easy to cook, and therefore everything that's like salt that's easy to cook in a cliche you can't do. You can't cook. Okay, that's the smog. Now, if you skip a few lines, it says v'smak. Skip like 5 lines, and it says v'smak katav.
The smak katav b'divrei re'im shasur litain pas b'soch kli rishon be'odor seach. So the smak says that you can't put bread into a kli rishon as long as the liquid or whatever's inside is still boiling.
And he's also saying it in the re'im. And it says re'im, that's also Rabbi Eliezer mimitz. So he's saying you can't put it in a kli rishon. Ba'oda roteach, when it's still hot.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Rabbeinu katav.
The Rabbeinu katav da'afilu b'klisheni asur k'moshe kasuv b'smag. V'chein kasuv gam Mordechai perakira udivrei re'em usmag suvim gam kein b'hagahos maimonios. Perak test v'sham.
So he's saying when he says Rabbeinu, he means the tour. The tour quoted not. So what's the difference between the smog and the smak? The smog says klisheni is usher, and the smak says it's not. And the tour and the tour quoted the smog, which is the more machmir opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now he quotes Haggadah with my maniot.
Right. The sham mevuar shelo asar re'em litain pas lasoch klisheni min hadin.
Oh. So now we're going to start to explain why it's not a tamiha. In other words, he's going to explain a slightly different understanding of why it's usher. It's not min hadin. When he says not min hadin, means it's not the strict din. It's just like a chumrah. It's just a chashash. So go on. Shekasvu.
Shekasvu deika trei lishnei b'melach. L'chad lishna afil b'kli rishon lo bishla, u'li'idach lishna afil b'kli sheni bishla. V'rishon ikar v'amachmir shelo lates b'kli sheni kol zman shayatzoledes bo tavo la bracha.
Okay, so I don't know so you should have seen this Gemara that I assigned that we talked about this whether one opinion is that the salt cooks even in a kli sheni, and the other is it doesn't cook even in a kli rishon. So there's 2 different opinions. And he says the halacha is really like the Mekil opinion. And therefore, you don't have a source for klisheni cooking because the halacha is not like the second opinion. In other words, sorry, not like the machmir opinion. So there's no cooking by salt in the klisheni. So how come we're saying it's here asur? It's not maker adin. It's not the real din. But it's just tavo alav bracha. This is all the Tosfot that I assigned. Perhaps we should look at the Tosfot actually at the Gemara. So Well, I don't know. I guess we already read it. We read it, so that's probably enough. But I can just maybe jump a line. Here, open up the open up the Gemara and Shabbos Mem Bet. Mem Bet Amud Bet. Towards the top, it says Sava Rabbi Yosef.
Keep reading.
Wait. I wanna wait. No, I'll ask somebody else. Josie, you want to read the Gemara in Shabbat Mem Bet Amud Bet?
Mem Bet Amud Bet. I'm not seeing Amar of Yosef here. You sure it's Mem Bet?
Sava Rav Yosef Lemeimar Melach Harehu Ketavlin.
Okay. Sava of Yosef Lemeimar Melech Harihu Ketavlin. The V'kli Rishon Bishala V'kli Sheni Lo Bishala.
So that's the first opinion. That's the first statement of Rav Yosef. What is he saying?
Rav Yosef is saying that salt is like spices, and in a Kli Rishon, if you add it to a Kli Rishon, it's cooked, and and in a Kli Sheni, it isn't.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to get a response to this. Amar le Abaye Kane Rabbi Chia Melech ina Ketavlin, the V'kli Sheni Nami Bashala. And the Abaye is going to respond with the statement from Rabbi Chia, saying that salt is not like spices, and even in a Kli Sheni, it's going to cook.
The first opinion says it doesn't cook in a Kli. It does cook in a Kli Rishon, but in a Kli Sheni it doesn't cook salt. And the second opinion says no, it cooks everywhere. Now Upligi.
The Rav Nachman, Damar Rav Nachman, Tzricha Milcha Bishula Kevisra the Torah. So we have the statement from Rav Nachman that says that salt is required for cooking meat, ox meat or cow or tough beef.
Right. Try again. Try. That's not the right translation.
The Amar Rav Nachman. So I'm not quite sure.
Tzricha. A lot of times in Hebrew, the verb comes first, and then the subject, and then the object. And this is an example of that. First verb, then subject, then object.
So we need this, right?
No, that's the verb. When you translate to English, you got to put the tzricha later, because it's the verb. In English, you go subject, verb, object. And here they did verb, subject, object.
So that the salt is needed for cooking.
Not for. There's no for there.
So the salt is needed. Then I'm not. I'm reading it.
Yeah. All right. So somebody want to help you out?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to call on. I'm going to text
here, Max. You have a phone call here. Call Max for help from the phone.
It's something like the salt takes the amount of time that a piece of ox meat takes.
Right. So these milcha, tzricha bishula, salt needs bishul. How much? Kibisra de Torah, like the flesh of an ox, which is saying a long, long time. Which what? Why is that pligi? So what does that mean? How much is a long, long time? So it's a long time. So is that going to cook in a Kli Rishon or a Kli Sheni? Is that going to cook in a Kli Sheni? For sure,
probably not.
And it's even in a Kli Rishon, it's not going to cook because you're just putting it in, and maybe for a short time. So it says upligi de Reb Nachman, and argues on Reb Nachman. In other words, you could say he's just saying in a Kli Sheni doesn't cook, but in a Kli Rishon doesn't. But I think you could say there's a three-way machloket, and that's what the Tosfos learns it. How is it a three-way machloket? Because the first opinion said in B'kli Rishon bashla, b'kli sheni lo bashla. In a Kli Rishon it cooks, and a Kli Sheni doesn't cook. The second opinion says no, it cooks also in a Kli Sheni, so it cooks everywhere. And then the third opinion is the other only left possibility: it never cooks. It needs to cook it needs to cook for 3 days. So you're never going to finish cooking it on Shabbat. It needs to cook a huge amount of time. So you got 3 different opinions. And now we go Ikeda Amri. So Yossi. I mean Joseph.
So Ikeda Amri Sava Rav Yosef. So we could instead say that Rav Yosef says Lememar Melech Hare Kuk Tavlin Divichli Rishon Bishla Vichli Sheni Lo Bishla. Right? So and it's so
What does it mean when you have an Ikeda Amri?
So basically here we're coming back and saying it's possible to say that Rav Yosef is coming back and saying he really wants to say Melech Harihu Kitavlin.
Wait,
right?
so no, in this case, the Ikeda Amri, it doesn't always mean this, but in this case, the Ikeda Amri means we have a different version of the whole story. So we have 2 different versions, 2 different manuscripts, if you want to put it in modern terminology. We have another manuscript of this argument, and let's read this manuscript.
So this different version is, so it's possible that it was actually, it happened this way, that Rav Yosef said Lememar Melech Harihu Kitavlin V'chli Rishon B'shala V'chli Sheni Lo B'shala. So what's what we had before? Amalei Abaye Tani Rav Chia Melech Ena Kitavlin V'chli Rishon Nami Lo B'shala. V'hainu Amar Rav Nachman Tzricha Milcha Bishula Kivisur de Torah. So in this case,
Start again, translated from Amalei Abaye.
the Amalei Abaye Tani Rav Chia Melech Ena Ketavlin, right? Which is
It's not like a spice. And what is the din that it's not like a spice?
Nami Lo Bashala.
Exactly. That in Kli Rishon, it doesn't cook at all. So it doesn't cook, it doesn't ever cook. And
Right.
now
That puts the second 2 in more in accordance.
right, V'hainu da'amar Rav Nachman, Tzricha
this is
milcha bishula kebisra de Torah. And that is in accordance with what Rav Nachman said about salt never cooking. So according to the second lashon, we only have a 2-way machloket. And we have a klal in Sak, which is, in my words, you don't make an argument where you don't have to. If you have 2 versions, and one is only 2 arguments, and one is 3 arguments, take the version with 2 arguments.
The Rashi there makes a big emendation to it, shall we say?
A big what?
I don't know, emendation, a big okimta, maybe we could call it. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
Right, he says b'chli rishon nami lo b'shela umutali ten afilu b'chli rishon mishahaviro mina or. Right.
Yeah, okay. Nobody is saying that you can put it on the fire, right? Okay, thank you. Actually, Joel, you're right. I should have clarified that. Thank you for that clarification. I think Rashi is right. In other words, when we were saying you could cook it in a Kli Rishon, we might clear on the Kli Rishon that's not on the fire. So wait, does anybody know this expression? There was an expression for what I just said. Oh wait, I'll get you Ruben in a second. There's an expression for what I just said, which is if you have 2 choices, the one version that has like more arguments and one has less arguments. So there's a term that we saw actually. What was the term?
Other than Occam's razor?
Yeah, Occam's razor would be in English, but what's the term in the Aramaic? Joel, you know? It's afushe plugta lo mafshinan, which means this idea. We don't create machloket when we don't have to. It's a nice term. Afushe plugta lo mafshinan. So that's not what Tosfos actually doesn't quote that. But Tosfos, can anybody say why Tosfos says that we should paskin like this second lashon, which is that, in fact, and we should actually paskin that it never cooks, that salt never cooks. What does he say? Why does it? He basically says what I said, but what does he say? How does Tosfos put it?
They say it's because there's no challenge that's brought in the second version.
Right. In other words, in the second version, we have an opinion of Abaye, and he has the support for it. In the third opinion, we just have Abaye. In the first version, we just have, Abaye. We have 3 different opinions, and we don't know what's the solution. So we have a clear solution. So Tosfos says that we paskin like the second lashon, and therefore we're makil, and then not only the second lashon, but the lenient opinion of the second lashon. And then at the very last word, somebody want to look at the last words of Tosfos? What does he say? That I think I underlined it. Maybe in my version I underlined it. I don't know if I gave you. What's the last line of the Tosfos that starts v'hainu? V'hainu to Rabbi Nachman.
Is it that kol zman shehayatzalet bo tavo alav bracha?
A little bit before that, a little bit longer than that. Machmir.
Oh, v'hamachmir kalish nakama shaloli te melach b'kara kol zman shehayatzalet bo tavo alav bracha. So it's nice if you don't add salt to your dish.
In your soup. Now he's saying even your kara, even your klisheni. As long as it's yad saledetbo. It's probably very quickly not yad saledetbo by the time it gets to your bowl. But if it's very hot soup, he's actually saying tavo alav bracha, which is funny because you hear that term in like modern poskim. You see that it's pretty old, that term, that concept. I think I don't know of another place where it's in Tosfot. But that doesn't prove anything. Okay. So let's go back to the Beit Yosef.
But that's twice machmir over Tosfot that he's tavo alav bracha, right? Because Tosfot is saying even in Kli Rishon shouldn't be a problem. And then he says, and those who are machmir, even in Kli Sheni, tavo alav bracha. Right? Because Tosfot was saying that the Gemara, the second
Yeah. It's a double jump. It's a double jump. Now, the Tosfot says, even in a Kli Rishon, it's not off the fire, you could put salt. But if you're machmir and don't even put it in a Kli Sheni, tavo alav bracha. So what if you're just in the middle and you do put it in Kli Sheni, but you don't put it in a Kli Rishon, it's off the fire? So then you're neutral, you don't get a bracha. Sorry.
I feel like that's called yesh mazhirin or yesh lahachmir. You know what I'm saying? Like tavo alav bracha is like extra. It's like not only are you being careful, tavo alav bracha, you're being double careful. You know?
Yeah, exactly. If you do a double jump, then you get a bracha. Wait, Ruben, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. I think I'm not entirely clear as to why the fact that it takes so long to cook, which also I think it's that it takes so long to cook, not that it never cooks maybe, but that it takes so long to cook, why that makes it mutter to do. Because won't you eventually it will come to cook regardless of how long it cooks. It takes to cook.
Off the fire. If it was on the fire, it would take a long time. We're talking if it's already off the fire, Kli Rishon's not going to cook it, and a Kli Sheni is certainly not going to cook it.
It takes a long time, right? But by the time it would start to cook, the pot would already be cooled off. I mean,
so then by the time it would start to cook, there's no possibility of anything cooking anymore because the whole dish is cool. Is that the
right? Something
maybe
like
that's
that. Or it's not intense enough of a heat to ever cook it. Because I might say I have a very big pot. If you have a super industrial pot, it could take it 24 hours to cool down. I don't know if they had pots like that in those days, but okay, Joel, what do you say?
No, also if we could, like if it takes 3 days to cook, you never on Shabbos ever reach the level.
Well, right, that's what I said. I said that. That's what I said actually a little earlier. That I said, yeah, it takes so long to cook. It takes 3 days to cook. You'll never be able to accomplish that on Shabbat. It won't be ever over an Avera. By the way, this comes up next year when we learn this similar idea comes up next year when we learn Yeridea, where you have, let's say, there's an opinion. Beit Yosef says a funny thing that the people give him trouble for, which is like if you have a pot that has only a small amount of iser in the walls, but you always use it for a large amount, then you could do that. You could, even though it has a little bit of iser in the wall, but since you're always using it for a large amount, it's always going to be batel. Right, Joe?
You could use it without koshering it, you're saying?
Yeah, right, without koshering it, because you'll never come to an avera because you always put in a huge amount, so it'll always be batel in 60. But Joel, what do you say?
I think we also have a thing with kibush, right, where it says because it takes 24 hours to happen, and by then the tam is lifgam, right? There's like
Yeah, we talked about that also. That's another
yeah.
case. That's a more connected case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but my point is like, can you do why I'm connecting is because here you're doing something which is sort of usher, but because it will never actually come to the isser will never come to a manifestation, therefore it's permitted.
Right, there's a difference between canceling out existing Isser or removing it versus doing something. They also talk about this, like this is when we get into things like not bar not as well, right? That it's not that you're allowed to do something and we find reasons to like matir would otherwise be prohibited. It's that it simply never arrives at a state of prohibition, right? You're not doing B-tool. You're just prohibiting it from everything.
Right. You never get there. Okay. Thank you. Now, I
think now we're in the Beit Yosef, because
where
we're
did
trying
we
to
stop
understand
exactly?
why somehow the way that the Torah quotes this Gemara seems a little out of step with Tosfot.
Yeah, we'll start again from Divrei. Who was reading the Beit Yosef before? That was Max?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we're at the Mikol Makom. I think.
Wait, start again. Can you start from Divrei Ra'im? Because I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. She'asor li'ten pas b'soch kli rishon be'odor seach ve'Rabbeinu kasav de'afilu b'kli sheni asor Moshe kasav b'smag v'chein kasuv gam b'Mordechai perakira.
All right, keep going.
Okay. The Divrei is Rabbi Eli Remintz v'usmag suvim gam ken b'hagos maimonios.
Right. That's you read.
Right. V'sham mevuar shelo asar re'im li'tein pas l'soch kli sheni min hadin.
So that's the idea. It's not min hadin. Shekasvu. Go ahead.
Right. Shekasvu de'ika trei lishne b'melach. L'chad lishna fil b'kli rishon lo bishla li'idach lishna fil b'kli sheni bishla. V'rishon ikar v'hamachmir shelo lates b'kli sheni kol zman sheyatzoletes bo tavo alav bracha. That's the Tosfos.
That's basically the Tosfos, right? A lot of times the Hagot Maimoniot are basically the Lashon, the same as the Tosfot. They're just the same people. But that's Tavola Bracha. Mikol Makom.
Right. Mikol Makom chazinan deyesh dvarim hamisbashlim b'kli sheni ve'ein anu b'kin berakin v'kashin lekach tzarich lizeher b'pas. Right. So even though me'ikar adin, or I guess me'ikar adin, we know that there is such a thing as cooking in a kli sheni, and because we don't really know what's easier or harder to cook, it's better to be machmer.
What does he mean, chazinan? Does he mean we've seen in halacha, or we've seen in our experience?
I think so. We've seen in the halacha.
Where have we seen that?
I think with the second lishna. No, wait.
Yeah, but we don't paskin like that.
I think he does think empirically. I think he means like
I think he means empirically here, exactly.
I think it's similar to when like Rabbeinu Tam is talking about things being like polets, and he's like, oh, they tried to say things aren't polets while they're boiling, and he's like, I've boiled vegetables. I've seen that the water turns green. Like
exactly. I think that's what he means.
I know that happens.
I think the chazinan here, and Joel wants to tell us something from you didn't know you did, but you want to tell us something from the Aruch HaShulchan about tea.
Oh yeah, because he says we see that tea cooks in the cliche. He actually
he says we see. That's the chazina. We see that tea cooks.
Although the Yikro Moshe's response is like water.
And Moshe's response is exactly the opposite.
Even when it's cold.
He's saying you haven't seen anything. All you saw was that the water got dark, but I can get water dark without it cooking in cold water. So. But I think here he says, Mikol makom chazinan deyesh dvarim hamitbashlim b'kli. Wait, the only problem with this reading that I'm trying to say here is ve'ein anu bakim berachim v'kashim. If we're not bakim,
it's funny to say that.
Right, it's funny to say that. Once you say we do see it, then we are bakim. Then we know how to tell. But maybe he's just saying we see that some things cook like tea, and therefore, and tea happens to give a color. So maybe if you put parsley in your hot water, it doesn't give a color, but it also cooked. We have no way of knowing if it cooked because it never would give a color. So I think it could be like that. And because he did say that there's no cooking klisheni. We're gonna see another opinion that says, well, it actually we're not gonna see, but the other Tosos that I had you look at, talks about how kli, how irui, it talks about irui and how it cooks kadei klipa. And that might be what he's talking about, if you want to say it's halachic. But whatever he's saying, I think he's saying that we see that some things cook and we don't know what they are because maybe they don't give a sign. And therefore we invent this idea called kali bishul and the kach tzrichim lizaher bepat. Ad kan l'shono. And that's the lashon of the Re'im, of the Yiraim. Yeah, questions, comments.
Is it possible he's talking about salt when he says chazinan? Does it not seem that salt cooks?
Well, that's what Max was saying, but I sort of wanted to go away from that because because I don't think that's the way he's paskin. Didn't he just say?
No, meaning there might be some case of salt that's soft enough to cook easily in a klisheni, but and that's what gives us the suffix to not be bekian. I don't know what salt he had, but it's possible that there's something.
When you have two different lush, you're saying, what's the second lashon in the Gemara? Was it that salt was cooking in a klisheni? No. If the lashon,
one in the Gemara was the first one was.
Yeah, but we don't go like when he says harishon ikar, he means the rishon in the order that he brought them.
I know, but I was thinking the first one in the Gemara proves that it was possible for them to think that something would.
Yeah, but we reject it. It's a faulty manuscript. Joel.
But I think you could say that there's an assumption in the Gemara, the fact that they the response in the Gemara isn't nothing cooks in a klisheni. The response in the Gemara is no, salt isn't one of those things, and there may be this sitting behind this idea that there are things that cook in a klisheni. Salt isn't one of them at the end. We have a debate about salt and we decide it's not, but there might still be other objects out there that do cook in a klisheni. The Gemara just didn't mention them, I think is but the fact that it's even willing to entertain the idea might be enough proof that some things do.
Is this
no, I don't think, did it really entertain that idea? Or did it just say that is it like tavlin, which cooks in a kli rishon, doesn't cook in a kli sheni? Or is it not like?
Well, in the second version, yeah, but no, it entertains the idea. It hasn't, it doesn't reject it. It just says ika de amre, right? It just gives us a different version. It doesn't, and the Tosfos would have to go out of their way to prove that the second version is what we're going to follow, especially considering that Tosfos
out of their way. I don't know. It's a question. I mean, when you have two different gears, they can't both be right. Only one of them is right. It's not another opinion. It's another girsa.
I know, and Tosfos says
he's saying one girsa is right.
Yeah, and they admit that who is it? It's one, not Rabbeinu Tam. When you have a machloket like this, two lishne, and one of them is it's a devar Torah. You halach achar machmir, right? It's Rashi actually. There are reasons to think that the first one would be the halacha, even though we don't follow it. So,
and it's enough for chazinan. That's what I'm saying. Tavola bracha also. It's enough to say that there is a hypothetical of something in the world cooking in a klisheni, and that's from all of these sources that it doesn't come lahalacha. But again, it has to be conceptually possible.
Right. That's what I feel like. In the world of the Gemara, it was conceptually possible.
The Gemara never says umi b'klisheni mevashel, right?
But still, so we have so you're saying we have an inference from the Gemara that there's something that cooks, and we have no listing of any of those items, and therefore we have to be machmir about everything that could possibly be rach or dak. Okay, I mean possibly. Okay. Here, continue on in the Beit Yosef. Ubezeh nitbatel.
Uveze nispatel masha tamar Rabbeinu lama asur b'klisheni.
In other words, now we can get rid of this problem that the Beit Yosef, that the Tur had. The Rabbeinu was the Tur. He was Tama. Why is something cooking a klisheni? Why? How do we get rid of it? Because what?
Because one could think that something could cook in a klisheni.
Well, here, so read. Let's see what he says. Continue on.
וגם מה שכתב ואינו נראה לאסרו בכלישני, שטעמו הוא משום דבמלח קיימלן כלישנה דשארי.
Yeah.
ומסך דברי הגהוס נלמוד, דגם ראה מאוד בכך. ואפילו הכי יליף מן השפיר, דיש דברים רכים שמתבשלים אף בכלישני, וכיוון שאיננו בקיאים בהם צריך להיזהר.
So what is here the umitoch divrei hagaot nilmad shegam Rabbi Eliezer means mode bekach. He agrees with what? That melach doesn't cook. Vafilu hachi yalif minei shapir, and nevertheless he learns the yesh dvarim rachim shemit bashlim af beklisheni. He nevertheless learns that things cook in a klisheni. How does he learn that? Maybe like you guys were saying, because of the Havamina, maybe.
This list that doesn't exist.
Yeah, the list that doesn't exist. So he says, basically what he's saying like this. Tur, you misunderstood Rabbi Eliezer Mintz. Rabbi Eliezer Mintz, when he said you have to be careful about klisheni, it wasn't because of the salt case. It was because of an inference from the salt case. He wasn't actually pasking that salt cooks. He was just saying that we don't know what cooks, and he was being machmir about a klisheni, but he wasn't saying it's the ikar adid. Here, so read another sentence here. Mordechai.
The Mordechai beper kira kasav divrei re'em v'rayaso mida amar Rabbi Yossi yotzin beraki kasharui aval lo bimvushal. V'kasav alav mihu ra'avya kasav delav miltahi debeper ketza mevarchin maitila umasik de'ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yossi elo lagabe matzah debaitam matzah v'leka. Right.
So what is he saying here?
This is the source that we saw earlier, but the Ravya doesn't think it's a good proof because the concern.
Say what the proof was.
The proof was that you are yotze in terms of matzah with this matzah that's been soaked but not cooked.
And that proves that.
And that proves that
there's bishul.
The bishul didn't cancel out the baking.
No, that the bishul did cancel. No, that proves that there's bishul acharafia. Said that was the proof that there's bishul acharafia because you baked your matzah and now you cooked it and ruined it. So there's something called the bishul takes effect. And the Rav Yah says this is not a proof. Why it's not a proof?
Because there's a separate issue at play, which is that you need tam matzah and you didn't have it.
In other words, it doesn't necessarily prove that it cooked. It just proves that it changed the flavor through heat. It ruined the flavor. It has a special din by matzah that you have to have tam matzah and you don't have it. But it doesn't mean it actually cooked. I mean, maybe if you would pour, vinegar on your matzah or soak it in pomegranate juice, maybe you wouldn't be yotze with it. It doesn't prove that the bishul took place. It just proves that you lost your tam matzah. And therefore you have no proof that there's bishul. And therefore the Rav Yaz seems to be saying what? That there's no bishul acharafia. All right, we'll take a break here. Take a break for 5 minutes. I want to know if somebody can summarize the variety of opinions that we've seen just today about bishul afia. Can Josie? You think you can do
The
it?
most one we have is that there is indeed, bringing from the Pesachim case, you do have Bishul Achar Fia, which was the whole discussion we had back and forth with the Mordechai and the Tosfot, and then we go, we have this notion that
And wait, Bishul Achar afia? In what kelim?
this was the case. I think it's in you're asking whether it's Kli Rishon or Kli Sheni.
Yeah.
From what my understanding was, it's a Kli Rishon, and that Kli Sheni it's not applicable.
Well, I want all the opinions. What are all the opinions? Without names, just the opinions.
Well, in terms of Bishul Achar Fia, it's just it either doesn't exist. In other words, there ain't Bishul Achar Fia, or
no. Relate to Kli Risha off the fire, Kli Sheni off the fire.
So Kli Sheni off the fire, the opinions were, they're just, it either is or isn't. But no, I don't think anybody's holding the Kli Sheni off the fire. You have Bishul Achar Fia, right? That's like the knedels.
There is.
That's the knedels and soup. They're saying.
Well,
it's not
the
Yad
Yiraim. Right, the Yiraim seems to say, and what about the Smak and the Smog? Maybe it is helpful to have the names.
Right.
The Smog seems to say that even in Kli Sheni there's Bishul Achar Fia. That's the Smog. In Kli Sheni, Bishul Achar Fia. The Smog says in Kli Rishon there's Bishul Achar Fia, but not in Kli Sheni. Those are two interpretations of the Yiraim, right? Two interpretations of the Yiraim. And then Tosfos kind of settles it and says that what Tosfos says, what does Tosfos say? There's no cooking in a Kli Sheni, but in a Kli Rishon there would be. So he's basically agreeing with the Smak. The Smak. And then we saw the interesting opinion of the Rav Yah, which seems to say that there's no Bishul Achar Afia even in a Kli Rishon that's not on the fire, because you have no proof. That would be the most lenient opinion. And actually, also, we didn't see, but the Rambam also says like that, as far as I recall. So let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch now. So in fact, we'll spend the rest of the time in the Shulchan Aruch. So, Shin Yud Chet, Hey. And our goal is to see how much of the Shulchan Aruch we can finish today. So we read Hey already, so we won't read it again. But when the Shulchan Aruch says, he says, Asur l'ten pat afilu b'kli sheni. Who is he paskening like? Who is that like? On the simplest way of understanding it. Who's that? That's the most strict opinion. Who's the most strict opinion? Smag. Exactly. V'yesh matirin.
B'kli Sheni.
B'kli Sheni, who would that be?
That's the Smak, and
that would be the Smak. Right. That would be the Smak and maybe the Tosfot. V'yesh mekelim b'kli. V'yesh mekelim afilu b'kli Rishon. Who would that be?
The Rav Yah.
That's the Rav Yah. Okay, so we got it all here. The Nagul is Zaher l'chatchila shelo liten pat afilu b'kli Sheni. Kol zman sheyatsa let it go. Who is that? Who would you say is that? I think that's, well, Joe, what do you say?
That's the Tosfot.
That's the Tosfos, and it's also really the Rav Yah. In other words, what did the Tosfos say about Kli Rishon? He said that the whole din. You understood the Tosfos saying the whole din, whether it's Kli Rishon or Sheni, is all a chumrah, is not based on anything.
So that's the way I was taking it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the Tosfos. I'll go with you. Okay, so that's the Tosfos. All right, let's go to Vav. Here, Joel, you read Vav.
But okay, never mind. I
You have
wanted
a
to go
question? No
back.
comments or questions on hay?
No, there's an interesting taz about uncooked food, right? In Klisheni, right? About onions. That I thought was interesting. It came up once on Shabbos, but I don't want to derail everything. So it's
No, you mean in Chet? You mean Chet?
yeah, in Sif Katan Chet in the taz. Right?
Yeah, I actually did mark that one to do. So maybe we can look at it. Here, I'll read it. Nagu shelizaher lechatchila. So we're actually being machmir lechatchila. So let's see. Perush. I'll read. Perush she'ein notnin lechem b'marak shel cholent. You don't put in your cholent or cholent. Yeah, cholent. That's cholent. You don't put bread in your cholent. Venerally, the otan shechotchim batzalim dak dak, benotnim letokam arak. If you chop up onions nice and small, and you put them in your cholent or your soup, lo yasimin arak achar shelo tiyeh hayad soledet bo. You got to wait for it to cool down. De belechem yesh kula, because lechem we could say we could be a little more lenient. The machmat shenafa kfar, it's already been baked. Vafilu hachin is arin kol shekei batzalim. So in other words, we're by bread where it's already cooked, we're careful. So by onions, all the more so, they're not even cooked at all. So you should wait till it's not yad sledet bo. Even though you could say onions don't cook in Kli Sheni because who says they're Kali Bishul? Maybe they're not. Mikol makom yesh lo imar deshemahu kemelach lelashon echad. Maybe it is like the melach according to the lashon, according to the manuscript that said it is a problem with salt. The mitbashel kemo shekatav besiftet ayin shan de lo bekiin anu b'midi de mikre rachim. We don't know what cooks fast. V'aser v'hainu kol zeh shayad soledet b'marak. But that's all this din of Kali Bishul is only when it's Yad Soledet. If it's not, what is Yad Soledet? What temperature is that?
Say 110, 120, I don't know, something like that.
104, I see.
Yeah.
It's enough to make a big fry when you drop it on its tummy.
Well, I want to know the number.
I've heard anything from like 110 to 130 Fahrenheit. So it's
yeah, something 72 degrees Celsius. I don't know, something like that.
72 is much higher than that.
That's higher. That's higher than I was saying.
That's higher.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there in a practical sense. The advice that you get from local utilities is you don't turn your own hot water heater up past 120 Fahrenheit because otherwise you end up with scalding burns. So practically
Mine's on
speaking,
140.
yes, well, Ezekibor.
But it's not burn. It won't burn you, I guess, is my point, really. But it's definitely feels hot, quite hot.
I just want to say this came up. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because this actually happened once on Shabbos. The whole question, sometimes people put like in their soup, like after they serve it, like a little piece of parsley or something like that, right?
Right.
And it's assuming, depending on what you think about the ladle and all that, but potentially it's Klisheni. And the whole question of like, can you put this uncooked piece of parsley in the soup in a Klisheni when it's still hot on Shabbos?
Right. And I think, that these poskim, perhaps unlike Rav Moshe, but these poskim, like we saw in the Yereim, who said Sheni and Shlishi is the same thing. And here he says Kli Sheni, he doesn't say Kli Shlishi, he doesn't talk about that. All he talks about is Yad Soledet. It seems to me the ladle, according to him, doesn't make a difference. It's just, all that matters is Yad Soledet or not. And Yad Soledet, you stick your finger in it, and if it's very hot, then you can't do it. it's funny. It makes me want to try putting onions in my cholent, but then I shouldn't. Okay. Actually, I have also circled tet. So let's look at. Oh, tet is on the next halacha. So Joel, you're on the spot. Vav.
Shulchan Aruch, kli sheyesh bo davar cham sheyad zolet bo. So you have something that has hot food. It's still at yad zolet bo. Mutar lehanicho b'Shabbat al gabei k'teira tmuna k'dei sheyishmor chumo v'lo yisanen. So you can put it. You have a k'teira that's insulated and it's hot, and you put the kli with the hot stuff in it on top of the k'teira. It's like a second level thing in order to keep the heat in it so it doesn't cool down.
Now,
yeah.
I visualize this. I wonder if anybody else had the same visualization, because I was wondering, how do you put it onto something that's tamun? When I think tamun, I think it's covered with blankets. So you undo the blankets, but then you're tomen. So what I think it is a case where you have a kira, this oven, and then you wrap the sides of the pot, but not the lid. And therefore you could put things on top of the lid. If you turn over the lid, then you can put another pot on top of it. But the sides of the bottom pot are tamun, are covered with a blanket, but not the whole pot. Because if it would be covered the whole pot, then what, you can put on top of the blanket? That's not going to do anything. So you could have to open up the blanket, but then you're doing hatmana on shop, whatever. It's I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine you could rest it on the blanket also, or if it's like on feathers.
Wouldn't do anything. I mean, if it's a good blanket, it wouldn't do much.
There's a friend of mine, his cousin or something like that, invented this thing that I think it's a little foil that it's made to fit onto the top of a crock pot, and then there's a surface where you can put a dish onto the foil so that it, as in if you don't also want to turn on a plot or deal with a blech or whatever, you can just have whatever thing you need heating on top of your cholent.
But do you put that up before Shabbat, or you put it on Shabbos morning?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about.
That's right.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a whole big halachic discussion about crock pots. So some people, the machmir opinion is you got to put a lid of a jar on the bottom to create a gap.
Or marbles. Marbles is the thing I've
Marbles is a good idea. Okay, yeah. Marbles.
Yeah.
Just don't pick up the marbles immediately after turning off the crock pot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about, again, you have basically a crock pot, and you want to put something on top of the lid of the crock pot.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, kli, again, read it again from the begining, Joe, because we got off.
So you have the kli that's got something already, it's still hot in it, right? It's a hot food, and it's still yad zolepo. You can put it entirely on a chobah Shabbat al gabei k'teira tmuna. You can put it on top of an insulated pot on Shabbat, in order to keep the heat in the top kli.
So in other words, it has to still be hot. You can't put something cold there. But you could, let's say your plata turned off, the timer turned off, and now you want to keep the food warm, so you put it on top of your crock pot.
So, and you can even plaster essentially the lid of this kli with dough, as long as you had dough that was already needed before. You can't do lash on Shabbos. So.
And presumably this dough won't be cooking on Shabbat because it's not going to be that hot.
It'll be the outside. I think and imagine that's not.
Yeah, it must be that you're assuming that it's not going to cook.
But aval. But you can't, if the thing is cooled down in the top kli, you can't put it on the crock pot because that's really hot. Because what will happen is you'll have this cooled substance in the top kli, and it will get back to yad zolepo from the bottom kli, and that can be a problem. Of course, we have to.
Now, what was he talking about here? Was he talking about when he said a davar ham? What did he mean? This is basically the Beit Yosef that I gave you. What does he mean by davar ham? Does he mean fully cooked in cham, or not fully cooked in cham?
Potentially not fully.
Max,
cooked.
You're nodding your head. What's?
I was just frustrated by that section of the Beis Yosef, and so I don't want to get into it.
Oh, wait, yeah, I had to read it a couple times. It's a bit confusing. What is he talking about? Devar cham shay. So, what is well? Okay,
Should we read the Taz?
all right. Let's go. Let's just leave that as a question. Read Zion.
Me again?
Where did you stop? Aval.
Yeah, we're at Zion. We're at Zion.
Zion.
All right, Yesh Mefarshim, the had the Shar Le'neach Klish Yesh Bo Davar Cham Al Gabei K'dirat Tmuna, Afilu Kli HaTachton Al HaEsh Share, Yesh Mefarshim Shim Kli HaTachton Al HaEsh Le'Olam Asur. So there's a dispute between when we said we can have something, the top Kli has something hot in it, and you can put it on the bottom Kli that's insulated. Are we talking about the bottom Kli is still on the fire or is it off the fire? Some people say it's even when it's still on the fire, it's permissible. And some people say, no, it's forbidden when it's on the fire. It's only when it's the bottom Kli is off the fire that you're allowed to put the second.
So in that case, the crock pot would not be allowed.
Exactly, because it's still on the fire.
In that case, the crock pot would not be allowed, and you'd only be doing it when it's off the fire.
Well, it depends. It also depends why you think the fire is a problem. Is it a problem because it's still heating? It has a heat source, or because of Shemei Chatebek Chalim, even on for the second thing,
Or because it's near a kibishul.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe like a like a plata might be different, which is never near or maybe not near a kibishul, or you can adjust the controls.
Here, let's look at just to answer our question according to the Taz, because I asked that question in Vav. What is in Vav? I asked, what is this thing? Is it fully cooked or not fully cooked? Look at Taz Tet here. Ruben, you want to read?
Sure.
Taz
So
Tet.
Davar Cham Sheyat Zoledepo.
Yeah, Tet, exactly.
Okay. Davar Cham Sheyat Zoledepo ve'afilu lo nitbashel kol tzorko.
So how does he answer it?
Right. So even if it isn't as cooked as it can get, fully cooked,
And it would be permitted.
it would be permitted. Yeah.
Because you could put it, as long as it's still warm, you want to keep it warm, you could do it even if it's not fully cooked. That's pretty weird. Why? Are you going to cook it more? Go read on. Why?
Demrina le'el b'samuch, diyesh ba mishum bishul afilu v'roteach, shane hacha she'i efshar lavo lidei bishul gamur.
Oh, this is very important. I mean, this is like a summary kind of the Beit Yosef. So
I think this has to do with what the Beis Yosef says, where he says that we're not concerned about making a distinction between ma'achal ben drusai or not here because it's not bishul mamish. It's never going to be bishul mamish. This is, I think, that was not so clear to me. But
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that the distinction that we're drawing is here. It's never going to. It's not going to cook more. In other words, it's not hot enough to cook more, and that's why it's permitted. So read the words. You translate the words you said. The yesh bo when we said Darminan la'el b'samach, the yesh bo mishum bishul, which we learned in this Siman in Shin Yud Chet, that there is bishul achar bishul. If it once it's reached ma'achal ben drosai, it can still cook, even if it's hot. The yesh bo mishum bishul afilu biroteach shani hacha. This seif is different. She efshar levoli de bishul gamor. Because we are putting it in a situation where, especially if you say it's not on the fire, it's not going to be so hot that it'll ever cook anymore. In other words, so what is the problem? Well, there is no problem. That's why you're allowed to do it.
It's keeping it at Yad Soledet, Bo. It's continuing is sort of like in between heat that's not hot enough to cook, if I understand correctly.
Exactly. It's sort of like putting it on a warmer. Go ahead.
Keep reading.
Let's read a little bit. Let's see what he says.
V'hada mina b'gemara v'lo bishvil sheyuchmu ela bishvil sheyishmor chomo. Perush lo yaniach tzonen kedei sheyucham aval cham kvar mutar she'en kan ela shmirat chomo v'lo yavo lidei bishul gamor. Right. So you're just trying to preserve its current temperature. That's all you're doing. It's just you're just being lishmor chomo.
And not sheyuchmu. What is sheyuchmu? Sheyuchmu means that it was cold.
Right. It's not like it was cold and you're trying to reheat it. It was already hot and you're just trying to preserve the temperature. And so you're never going to come.
That's what he says. Perush lo yaniach. What did the Gemara mean? No, because you could have learned that sheyuchmu means that it will cook. And bishvil sheyishmor is like less, but he's saying no. Lo sheyuchmu perush lo yaniach tzonen. You shouldn't put a cold thing. That's what it means. Like lo sheyucham aval cham kfar mutar she'ein kan el shmirat chomo v'lo yavel lidei bishul gamur. In other words, we're in this middle. You can't put a cold thing on a warmer to warm it up, is what he's saying, because you might come to cook. You might that might lead people to cook. But you could put something that's warm on a warmer. And why on a warmer? Because a warmer, and there it doesn't matter whether it's fully cooked or not, because the unfully cooked thing will not become fully cooked on a warmer. That's kind of what maybe we'll take a look at Reish Nun Chet in a minute, but let's okay. So that's Vav and Zion. Let's read Chet, Joel.
We also see that in the Seifa of Vav. We see that he says you can't warm something up to the Yad Soledet bow. Same temperature, really. It's just a problem from going from cold.
Where are you referring to us?
In the end of Vav, he spells that out in the Shulchan Aruch.
אבל אין מניחים כלי שיש בו דבר שאינו חם כל כך על גבי כדי שהיא חמה כל כך שהעליון יכול להתחמם מחומו עד שתהיה יד סולדת בו. Exactly, but the Taz is explaining why. Once it becomes yad soledet bо, then it could actually cook. And that's the proof kind of that.
No, you just said it's still not going to cook because it's only going till yad soledet bо. It's the same temperature in both cases. It's just the
no. But he's saying you shouldn't put it. Aval ein manichim kli. You can't put it even if it's warm in a position that it would possibly get yad soledet, because then you might actually be cooking something.
Well, you said it. You would. You might come to cook. But again, technically, both cases are ending with yad soledet bо. In one case, it was already yad soledet bо.
That's not what I meant. What I meant is.
So then I don't really understand, because
by a cold thing, you can't put it on a warmer because you might come to cook. Not that you might. Let's say that it might lead people to come to a faulty conclusion that you can cook on Shabbos. I don't know.
So I don't really understand the difference in the ratio in the Seifa case, according to the Taz at least. The Taz is saying it won't actually cook to take something that's already yad soledet bо and keep it yad soledet bо, right?
Exactly. What I want to say is like this: Sif Vav is talking about non-cook.
It's still only reaching yad soledet bо. It can cook. What can cook?
No, that's the thing. The concept is like this. This is what I understood from the Beit Yosef, the long Beit Yosef that I assigned. That once something becomes yad soledet bо, then we've entered into the realm of cooking possibilities. It can cook. In other words, yad soledet is another way of saying a situation where cooking is going to occur. So therefore, if you take something that you put it in something that's not going to become yad soledet bо, then even if it's raw or partially raw, you could put it there because it's not going to come to cook. But if it's cold, that's a different problem. You can't put it there even in a place where it won't come to cook if it's cold, even if it's fully cooked, because it looks like cooking. Let's say like that.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So the second case is it's not actual cooking either, but it is warming. It's truly warming something.
Right, warming.
And that is like cooking. Keeping something warm
like a bit of a picture because I mean we all know that you're allowed to put things on a plata that are cold to warm them up.
We're talking about a tavshil, I thought, the whole time.
Oh, well, we're going to get to that in Chet, right? The things that are. Yeah.
Well, in the Torah was a tavshil. The Torah spelled out in the Sif was a tavshil.
Exactly. So we're talking about liquids. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we got that clear. But what about Zion? Zion makes a little bit of a problem. Yesh mefarshim dahar deshari lahaniach kli sheyesh bo davar cham al gabei kedera hatmuna afilu kli hatachton al ha'esh shari. How would that be? In other words, it could be on the fire, but it's still not going to get the Yatzaletipo. It's a very low fire, and it's a very big pot, and the top of it will still never get you to Yatzaletipo. Okay. Because that really looks like cooking. Even though it's not going to get to the fire, it's not going to actually cook.
Although the Magen Avraham tells us if it was on a kirat first, then you can put it there, right?
If you took it directly from a kira.
Yeah, and there's like your case, like your plata turned off somehow, but it was like on the plata. You put it. You can then put it on the top of the thing. So.
But look at Yud Aleph, and he says if you skip the first two lines, he says Venira de gam zeh b'makom she'i efshar lavo lidei bishul gamur. In other words, even in Zion, it has to be a case where even if it's on a pot that's on the fire, it has to be that the top thing will never come to bishul gamur. By the way, I also seem to get a concept like this. Like this is. Tell me if you guys learned like this also. I seem to think like this, that there's two moments where you can be over bishul. One moment is if you took it from raw to machal ben drosai, then you're over in bishul. And then the second place is if you got it from machal ben drosai to fully cooked. And that's what he's saying here exactly. To lowly de bishul gamur, won't come to full cooking. In other words, if you take it from machal ben drosai, let's say is 33% cooked, till 66% cooked, then you didn't do anything. You have to break a threshold in order to be over. And therefore, we're permitting you with the food here. I mean, I'm not sure what he means by, there's two possible things he could mean by Shelo Yidei Bishul Gamur. One is that it could mean, like I'm saying, that it won't get to 100% cooked, or it could mean it won't get to the temperature where cooking occurs. And that's maybe a better way to read it. But I just remember that when I was reading the Beit Yosef, it seems like there's these two thresholds.
I think that's good. You have this whole kind of public awareness act. We're afraid something's going to look like something. That's not bishul. That's a different avera.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, in other words, no one said the term marasayin, but it sounds like marasayin.
I think
but
so.
It's more than marasayin because it's also maybe a self-deception there that they're worried about. But it's a different category. So it's not even l'achil or b'di'ah, but it's a different category. A different category within the category.
Right. I mean, it can lead to a society where people will be treating cooking lightly.
You're right. So that's what I always say, that's public policy.
Right.
Decision.
Thank you. All right, Joel, continue reading Chet.
Okay. Laniach devar kar shin bashal kol tzarko. Okay. What about al gabe mecham shala esh? So you have your hot water urn on the fire, and you have something that was fully cooked, and you're going to put it on top of the hot water urn. Yeshorim should dino kemini chok keneged amdura. Some people say it's the same rule that we had before, putting something not on the fire but near the fire, right? So we'll get the rule here actually, but we've seen it about it has to be dry and fully cooked. Right? So anything that you can put near the fire in a place where it gets to Yad Soledepo, like something that is completely dry, you can put it on top of the mecham, on top of the kumkum. That's not a good translation. The hot water urn that's on the fire.
Wait, you're too fast for me.
Oh, sorry. I'll let me summarize that.
Over the beginning again.
Yeah. So I have something. I have cold something cold, but it's completely cooked, and I want to put it on top of. I have a hot water urn on the fire, and I want to heat it up that way, shall we say? So it's completely cooked. So some people say that putting it on top of on the hot water urn is no different than putting it near the fire, not on the fire.
Which we said is permitted because you're just trying to take off the chill of it. You're trying to take the chill off it, but not to actually heat it.
Yeah, and this is not something that is shayach bo bishul, right? Because it's already dry and mevushal. So
he didn't say. Wait, he said dry.
Yeah, he says, right, v'chol davar shemutar lanichol keneged derab b'makom she'ad solet bo kegon she'avesh mutar lanichol gabe mecham she'al gabe ha'esh. So
Right. Then he at the end there he says Yavesh, right. So a cold, dry thing you could warm up even on a pot,
but
but
okay.
at the distance that we had for Madura, which is like so that it will just take off the chill of that pot, right? Not to get it really toasty.
Exactly. Well, so Shema Yechateba Gachalim is no longer a problem, right? If it's Keneged Hamadura as opposed to Al Ha'ish, right?
Wait, why am I saying that only a little bit it heated up?
Yeah, because here it says, right, Keneged Hamadura is B'makom She'ad Solet bo, right? It still can get very hot. It's just not, you're not going to come to
I'm sorry, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. Yad Soledet bo. So you could put it here and get it hot. And why? Why are
because
you not worried that Shema Yechateba Gechalim?
because it's a second level kind of cookie. It's not really good cooking. It's
Mhm.
really just to try to warm the thing up, and so therefore you're
Okay.
not going to test the temperature. So
All right, go
but
on.
we have a yeshomrim. The yeshomrim dahavi kimaniach al gabe kiras. Some people say it's like putting it directly on the fire, lechatchila, right? V'asur afilu imnit bashel kol tzorko, and therefore even if it's a fully cooked thing, you can't do it. The afilu, this is where it gets interesting. Imnit stamek v'ralo. Even if when you put it on there, if it keeps cooking, it will get worse, and therefore you wouldn't maybe necessarily want to stoke the coals. Even if you're just putting it there to keep it hot, that's still potentially problematic. Very shown near a carb. He says, but that first opinion I said that says that you can do it if it's fully cooked and dry, that seems to be the true halacha. So,
Which seems to be why we're permitting on a plata to put things that are going to get pretty hot. A plata is considered like a pot on top of a pot.
Exactly.
Why? Because you can't lisachek big gechalim. You can't start stoking a plata. Certainly can't turn any knob. I mean, especially if it has no knobs on it. I actually believe a little bit that if you have knobs on it, that it would be allowed because you wouldn't. Why would you stir? The only reason you stir the gechalim is to maintain a constant temperature, and electric things are not naturally maintain a constant temperature. So I believe the gezerah doesn't apply to modern day cooking because the gezerah was about cases where you would be worried that your fire would go out, and we don't have that worry today. Yeah, Max?
It's possible though that the temperature you set the plata to before Shabbos was not actually hot enough for your food, and so maybe there'd be a concern that you would realize that at some point and then turn up the heat so that it gets warmer faster.
I mean,
it's not maintaining, but it's increasing.
Look at you with your fancy multi-temperature platter. Crazy.
Yeah, but I didn't hear what you said.
I have my father-in-law is a restaurant equipment person, and so one of the platas that we sometimes use is not a kosher plata, and it has knobs on it. And when we use it, I take aluminum foil and I cover the things.
Right. Well, I would answer you like this, and I would say that there was no chashash there was no gezerah that you would put wood into the fire. There was no gezerah that you would add coals to the fire. The gezerah was that you would stir the stoke the fire. And stoking the fire is just the normal thing you do to maintain the heat. Whereas putting new wood in, why didn't they go around that? Because that's the thing that you do to increase the heat. And that they knew people wouldn't come to do.
So,
I'm just saying my opinion. I've never heard anybody paskin like that, but I think that's the correct psak, personally. Yeah.
No,
Rabbi.
I think it's correct psak. Also, we have to think, like in Max's case, whether or not that's a new gezerah that Max is making.
No, I mean, it's very simple to say, and people have said
No, but
that
it's
nowadays the
Nudadera.
stirring of the
It's
coal
Nudadera.
is turning the knob, and therefore put aluminum on it. It certainly doesn't hurt them. I'm not
People
saying
can say it, but it doesn't.
right. People say that, and it doesn't. I don't think it really holds water, but um,
Max,
put
free the
aluminum on
knob.
it.
Free the
You know,
knob.
go for
The
gonna-
next time I do it, I won't use the foil.
it. I mean, you could say, well, I might turn it. Yeah, well, you might turn a lot of things. I mean, do you have to put a light switch cover on Shabbat? I don't, in my house, put light switch covers on my light switches. I just know not to turn them. So I don't see any difference.
It was also fun to feel like I was acting out Garufa Katum too, on a non-halachic level.
Yeah, no. You're not. I've seen this psak. I've seen this idea that you should cover. And in fact, there are platas, there are blechs, that you can put over your stove. And there's some of them that cover the knobs, and some of them, I mean, that don't, I think. And I think that the idea of covering the knobs is exactly this idea. And I would say that you don't need to cover the knobs. I mean, it's certainly good. Maybe your child will play with the knobs, so maybe you should cover them. But I'm saying you don't have to. Because it's, for example, or an oven. I mean, let's say, here's a question. Can you put food in an oven on a timer? The timer goes off an hour after Shabbat came in. And then when the timer goes off, you take the food out of the oven. What do you guys say? Is there any problem with that? Joel, what do you say?
Well, it depends if you think your oven's hatmana or not, right? It depends. Because then if you hatmana on something, it's mostly hevel before Shabbos, right?
Yeah, but there's air around it. It's not.
There is. Yeah, it's probably a big oven is probably not a problem. I imagine that's
normal oven. Yeah, I mean, it's
normal ovens that we have. Yeah, I think that it's probably.
No, I think the issue would be shema yichateh v'gechalim.
Is it fully cooked before Shabbos?
Well, or is it? What about machal ben drosai?
Well, good. The machal ben drosai may apply there too, right? That as long as it depends on who you paskin by. That if it's as long as it gets to machal ben drosai before Shabbos, you're fine. You're allowed to. That's the first.
Can't you just throw in a chicken leg?
Well, no, because then it would have to be. You'd have to be not for for Friday night. It would have to be for Shabbos morning at that point, right?
So yeah, I mean let's say hopefully it's cooked. First of all, according to Rabbeinu Tam, right? Shabbat comes in much later.
Well, yes, okay, yes. There's that leniency too, I guess.
So it would be cooked, fully cooked, let's say, by Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. Anyway, I think it's permitted. Maybe you should cover the knobs, but I don't think you have to. Also, I think it's how do you cover the knobs on an oven? Even if you put aluminum foil there, you can still turn it. It's just covering it to remind you not to do it.
Doesn't Rav Vaji Yosef say you just put like a little sticky on it that says Shabbat?
Yeah, but I can always do that. I mean, I don't think does anything. Okay. Wait, we're in Chet. Where are we, Joel?
Yeah, we're in the Yeshomrim.
Okay, so go ahead.
I read it. Yeshomrim dahave kemaniach gabe kira lechatchila ve'asur afil im nipashel cold circle. Some people say taking that cold, fully cooked dry thing, you can't you can't put it on top of something that's on the fire because even if it's fully cooked, ve'afil im mistamek ralo, even if it gets worse while it's there. Ve'afil im no sham lishmor chamo, even if you're just putting it there to keep it warm. That's a problem. Very shon near Aikar, but I think the Machaber says the first opinion that you were allowed to do it, that is the real deen.
So this is why. So if we go by the first opinion, that's why you can take, schnitzel, cook schnitzels and put them on the plata to warm them up. Okay, go on.
Imhu tavshil sheyeshbo rotev, but if it has liquid in it, mistafmek ve'afelo, which is very fascinating that he adds that here and didn't add it earlier. And it gets better as it keeps drying out or shriveling up. Asur l'divrei hakol, everyone agrees that is forbidden. So,
where did you mean before? What did he say before?
He just said, remember, it's the Ramah added that I think it's in Daled. right? The Rama adds that they're yesh mekilim if it's mistamek viralo, and it's only mistamek viafelo that it's concerned if it has liquid in it. And here the mechaber seems to maybe think that if it has liquid, it has to also be mistamek viafelo in order to be a problem of putting it back on the fire or putting it back on something that warms it up. So.
Right. Well, he's quoting the who is he quoting? The
Rabbeinu Yerucham.
Rabbeinu Yerucham.
Mm-hmm. But
so also, but notice that I brought you in one of the source sheets earlier that he went by Rove there. Here he's saying Yesh bo Rotev. As long as it has Rotev and it's Mistamek v'yafelo, it's Asur, which means it has to be totally dry.
Yeah.
But in the Beit Yosef that I brought you last week or 2 weeks ago, we saw that he says Rove. He uses the word Rove. And hence we have a machloket about this. All right, Tet.
All right. Kli Rishon. Perush, a kli shemishtamesh bo al ha'esh. Okay, so you have a kli Rishon, which I guess it's the Rama, explains to us what that is, in case we didn't know. Afilu le'achar she'evi.
Wait, where did you? I don't have that comment that you have.
Oh, really? Oh, I do. So
I have kli Rishon afilu le'achar she'eviru me'al ha'esh.
Oh, I have in parentheses with it may not be the Rama then, it may be some later editor wrote Perush kli shemishtamesh bo al ha'esh. So
okay.
Yeah, all right, for Kli Rishon, which afilu le'achar she'eviruhu me'al ha'esh. So mivashel kol zman she'ad tzelepo. So I have a Kli Rishon, it was on the fire cooking. I take it off the fire, even as long as it's still yad tzelepo, it still cooks. And so if I put something in there that's not, I am chayav for bishul on Shabbat. Lefichach asur li ten l'tochot tavlin. Therefore, I can't put spices in it when it's still yad tzelepo. Aval melach mutar li ten l'tochol kevan sheheviro me'al ha'esh. Right, but salt, once I've removed the thing from the fire, I can put in it. Tzricha milcha bishula kebisra de Torah, as we saw, as Josie read before. That's the second opinion, or it's Rav Nachman's opinion, and we poskin like the second version of it, that we need. It needs so much cooking that it.
So what's the practical difference between salt and tavlin? Salt you can put on the Kli Rishon when you took it off the fire. You can't put salt in your soup on the, let's say, on the plata. You can't salt the pot. But if you take the pot off, you could put salt in it. But you still can't put tavlin in it.
Exactly.
Until when?
Until it's below Yad Selepo or potentially in a Kli Sheni. We haven't seen that part yet.
Except that Kli Sheni could be a problem because of Kali Bishul.
Yeah. So
V'yesh mi
shoser latet latoch kli zeh, basar maluch afilu hu shel shor. And some people say that it's forbidden to put in this Kli Rishon that's off the fire, salted meat, even if it's ox meat, which
takes so long to cook.
Yeah. So.
And yet, why is it asur? Because the melach makes it easier to cook. The fact that you salted it before you cooked it, in other words, basar maliach, it means heavily salted, dried meat.
That's a little ironic.
The Rama seems to think that it's just any shore. It doesn't even have to be salted. It's just you wouldn't put salted meat in the pot because it wouldn't be kosher. So,
you think it just means maliach in a sense, not maliach le derech, but maliach le kedera.
Exactly. Yeah.
For those who learned Yeridea, that term comes up. So, all right, yeah. So read that to us.
Yeah. Hagav v'nireli de belam malomaloach nami asur. He says it seems to me even if it wasn't salted, it would be forbidden. Elav dinakat maloach belav hachi asur mishum dam shabo. He says, why did he talk about salted meat? Because if it wasn't salted, you couldn't cook it because of the dam. So.
Right. But also, it's also kind of obvious that you can't put meat into raw meat into a pot that's hot.
Mm-hmm.
Which one were we talking about? It's off the fire, but it's still hot?
Still Kli Rishon, and it's Yad Selepo, yeah.
Yes. It seems like you shouldn't put meat in that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. V'yesh osrim.
This is the Smog's version of the Yereim. Some people say you can't put Is that right? It's the first version in the Gemara, and this is gonna be the Tosfot, really, actually.
V'yesh osrim l'teit melech afilu b'kli sheni,
As long as it's
kol
Yad
zman
Solet.
sheyad soledet bo.
Yeah, V'amachmir
That was right. That's the
Tosfot in the end. It's
v'amachmir. No, amachmir tavo la bracha. That's also what he says. Mordechai. No, but
Yeah.
I think when it
It
says
says Tosfot and Mordechai.
and
Both
yeah.
of them.
no, but this
My
isn't it
version has-
Rabbi, is it Rabbi Yossi?
No, Rabbi Yossi is the Pesach case, right?
Wait a second.
Oh, who is in the
Abaye-
Rabbi Yosef.
Rabbi Yosef in the Gemara? Yeah. So
That's the one. Savar Yosef. Even in the Klisheni, you can't do it.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Savar
So,
Rabbi Yosef lemeimar melech arehu ketavlin. The bekli rishon bashla bekli sheni lo bashla.
Mhm.
And here we
Okay.
said
We
yesh
said-
os l'teit melech afilu bekli sheni. So that's
that's the first version of right of Rav Yosef.
no, that I just read you the first version.
Oh, so it is Rabbi
Amarle
Yosef.
Abaye Mele the klisheni nami bashla. It's Abaye in the first
Okay.
version. It's Abaye in the first version.
So
I think that's what he means. I don't know. Was there anybody else? Oh, well, it's the smog. Is it the smog again that we already mentioned before?
I think everyone agrees though that we don't paskin like that. So it's just so it's why it's so weird.
Wait a second.
But there is a
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
exactly. It seems to be Abaye according to the first Lashon.
so okay.
I mean, why would he be bringing that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because in the Tosfot, right, the Tosfot doesn't say Yesh Osrim, right? It just says Tavolav Bracha, the one who doesn't do it, right? Not that they're Yesh Osrim. I guess.
Here, look at the Yud Daled in the Taz. I actually have it
Taz?
marked here.
Yeah.
Yesh osrim l'teit melach. Ike shtei l'shonod b'zeh l'lishna batra have melech l'kula. The kasha l'tbashel k'bisra de Torah. Mahai time amutar afilu b'kli rishon shavir me'a'ish. L'lishna kama have melech l'chumra da'afilu b'kli sheni mitbashel. Upasku kalishna batra ela de Rama katav al piatosfot da machmir kalishna kama tavol of bracha ukvar zacharnu the v'char zacharnu be Siman Daled but Salim didn't. Okay, so in other words, the tavol of bracha is the Tosfot, but the yesh is definitely Abaye.
Yeah, it's just weird. The Tosfot say Yesh Machmirim, right? They don't say Yesh Osrim, which is
Exactly. So, but we're saying the Ramah had to explain why Tavol of Bracha. Why would we be Machmir? We're obviously being Machmir according to the opinion of Abaye. In other words, we have to first justify that there's some. You can't just be Machmir where there's no opinion. You can't just make up chumras. You have to have a basis for the chumrah. So the basis is Abaye, and then on that, Tosfos says Tavol of Bracha.
all right. V'imavar v'natan melach afilu b'chli rishon. So what if you did? What if you put salt in a kli rishon? Afilu hu ala eish, even if it's still on the fire, right? She'avad isura, and therefore you did something asur. Mutar hamachal. Nonetheless, the food is permissible. Da melach batel al gabei hamachal, right? Because the salt is batel to the food, which is going to cause all sorts of controversy as to why.
Yeah. So go back to the Beit Yosef in Tet. Because
Wait
wait a second. Here, look, read where it says katuv v'shiboli aleket.
That's in Tet in the, or is this under?
Let's ask somebody else. Maybe Ori, you want to read?
Sure. וכתוב בשיבולי הלקט בשם רבינו, רבינו שמחה. Or no, בשם
Yeah.
רבינו.
Rabbeinu,
No, שמחה על המלח שנתנו ביורה רותחת במזיד בשבת. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
no, I think it's Rabbeinu Simcha.
רבינו שמחה. על המלח שנתנו ביורה, okay, ביורה רותחת במזיד בשבת, okay.
Regarding melech that was put into a Yorah Rotachat, that was put into a big boiling pot, b'mezid, b'Shabbos.
I don't see any reason to forbid. Ela mitam dehevi
And here there's a
davar.
tikkun. It's not Ella, it's Lo.
Oh, I don't have that. Okay. Lo mitam dehevi davar sheyesh lo matirin. Velo mitam she'or v'tavlin.
Soor.
Se'or v'tavlin. Okay.
So he says, if you
Avidi
you weren't supposed to put salt in the pot. Which kind of pot is it? Off the fire or on the fire? Anyway,
maybe on the fire.
by the way, what I said, just parenthetically, what I said, Joel, about the salted meat, that's what the Ron, the Rosh says. Because the Rosh said in a little bit above in the Beit Yosef, he says the Meliach Yashan who Efshar da Asur de Mimaher Litbashel. That Dafka, the old salted meat, cooks faster. But anyway, so back to where we were. Again, so what Rabbi said, he says he doesn't see any reason to usher this food that has salt in it, even if putting the salt is forbidden. Why? Neither because of Tam and neither because of Devar Sheyesh L'Matirin. Devar Sheyesh L'Matirin is what? Is something that could become mutter later. And therefore don't eat it now, wait for it to become mutter. So he's going to explain.
The time avide hecha delo yahavi time batli kishari sure.
V'tavlin de la time avidi and spices that are made to flavor something. Heki delo yahiv taima, when they don't give a flavor, batle kishar sure, they would be batel. Those pepper can become batel as long as you don't taste it. It's not like tavlin are never batel, and the salt is a kind of tavlin. Kedemuchak beper kidanashe, sor shel chitin shenafal letoch isa chitin. So you have yeast of wheat that fall into the dough of wheat. If it would be batel in 101, haya batel. Ve'ilu lo haya bo kedei lachmitz. And if it wasn't enough to cause it to rise, if the forbidden sore that came in was not enough to do anything to it, the kol zev v'zeh gorem. And whenever you have two things that cause something, kachu saor shel chulin v'shel truma shenaflu l'toch isa. If you have forbidden sore and permitted sore that fell in, so you don't know which one caused the bread to rise. So it's called zev v'zeh gorem. You have two things that cause it to rise, and it's batel. But it's tarfu chimtzo the kimlan zev v'zeh gorem mutter. Whenever you have two things that are working in tandem to create a new product, if one of them is permitted, then the whole thing is permitted. And in the case of the salt, it's certainly zev v'zeh gorem. Why? The
You can't
mistama
taste the
nimlach
salt.
erev Shabbos, because you probably put some
Yeah.
salt in the soup before Shabbos.
Mhm.
El
There's salt
shelo
before
nimlach
Shabbos and on
tzorko.
Shabbos.
You just didn't do it enough. Or you read now, mitam.
ומטעם דבר שיש לו מתירין, אינו נראה לאוסרו, שהרי נתבטל קודם שנעשה, אסור, על ידי בישול. וצריכה מלכה בישולה כבסר דתורה. ומשעה שנמוך נתבטל. So
First of all,
there's
what was
a
the idea
mixture
of
of salt.
what is the idea of davar sheyesh matirin? Why would it be davar sheyesh matirin? Because after Shabbos, you could eat it. Right? In other words, on Shabbos, it's forbidden on Shabbos because you cooked on Shabbos, but wait after Shabbos, wait the time it would take to make it, or whatever, how much, whatever you have to do. You did a pashogi, mamezid, whatever the rules are, we already learned. But eventually you'll be able to eat it after Shabbos, or somebody will be able to eat it after Shabbos. So it's davar sheyesh matirin. He says, no, it's not davar sheyesh matirin because it became batal before that. Why? The kodem shenase isser, before it became an isser, al yidei bishul, by cooking. Because how did it become isser? The salt got cooked and infused the food. But before that happened, the tzricha milcha bishula kebisra deshora, it needs a lot of cooking. Umisha shenimoach, but once it became in the soup and it instantly dissolved, it was immediately batel. So it was batel before it got cooked. It takes a long time to cook, but it dissolves very quickly. So it was already batel before it cooked. So it was batel, and you didn't cook. Ad kan. And then look at Dalid in the Darkei Moshe. He says, Katav Mordechai bePer Kira. V'Rav Rabbeinu Dan Omer. I never heard of Rav Rabbeinu Dan, but there was apparently a rabbi named Dan. The melach shelanu, our salt, the mitaknin oto al yedei bishul ein lachush. That our salt, we cook it ahead of time, and therefore there's no worry. I don't know if this is true of our current salt or not, but it might be.
Depends which salt you take.
I mean, if you take salt that they evaporate, maybe they cook it. Maybe that's cooked.
That's what the Magen Avraham says, salt from the sea.
Right, salt from the sea is probably cooked. All right, so that's Tet. We didn't get to Yud, but it's very short. Wait, let's read. Asur liten tavlin bekara v'la'arot aleihem mikli rishon. You can't put tavlinim in a bowl and pour on them hot water. All right, I think that next time we're going to go to a different siman, Reish Nun Gimel. We didn't do everything here, but I think we did a pretty thorough job. You should finish, really. You should finish all the Seifim. There's not so much more, but you should finish the rest of the Seifim. Maybe by some miracle, Joel will go through all of the Simanim. Maybe not do so much Mishnah Berurah, just do the rest of the Shulchan Aruch.
We might do that.
We might do that, but you can also do Mishnah Berurah. Up to you. All right. So next week I'll keep you posted. I have to talk. I have to talk to Lexi and see what will be next week.
Do we have an update on Thursday, Rav Joel?
Oh, what time? Let me send out a thing.
Also, yeah.
If everyone's in the US, we'll keep it at the normal US time, but I just want to make sure. So
yeah, you're right. If you're all in the US, just keep it. And also, it's Purim, no?
No,
Yes.
it's Esther still for us. So
The only one who's not is Isaac.
okay, yeah. Let me talk to Isaac and see what he can. We'll figure it out. So
Okay, great. All right. Laila Tov, Shavua Tov, Yishar Koyach to everybody.
Thank you, Nachum.